welcome to tonight's workshop. We'll go ahead and get started. I know some people are still logging on, so while we're waiting, just as an icebreaker, in order for me to know who's here and so we can become a little bit more familiar, if you can go ahead and put your name in the chat. So just tell me your name, and as a fun little activity, tell me what your favorite snack is. So do you have a favorite snack that you like to eat between your meals, or is there a snack that you like to eat before bedtime? So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ailar. I'm the functional nutritionist at Pacific Integrative Psychiatry, and I'll share my favorite snack as well. So I love dark chocolate, but I try to avoid it close to bedtime, and we'll talk a little bit about why. So, as an alternative, sorry, I'm just going to, okay, perfect. Yeah, if you could just make sure to mute yourselves, but please participate later on. We'd love to hear from you. So my favorite snack is dark chocolate, and before bedtime, I sometimes like to have fresh fruit, or if I don't have fresh fruit, I like to have fruit bars, the ones that just have like 2 ingredients in them. I eat those with a little bit of chamomile tea. So if you're just logging on, I asked everyone to put their name in the chat box so I know who's here, and then tell me your favorite snack or bedtime snack. So what do you like to eat after dinner? You know, as you're getting ready for bed, if you tend to get hungry before bed, what's a snack that you like to have? So Nishi said handful of nuts. Yes, I like to eat nuts too. Jocelyn said trail mix, nuts, and chocolate. Yeah, same. I love chocolate too. And the combination of those two is so good together. It's like salty and sweet. Sherry said yogurt. Dr. Suriman said banana. Yeah, bananas are really good. And that's a food that we'll talk about as well a little bit later. All right, great. Nina said apples. Yeah, I love apples too. There's like so many different kinds nowadays, and you can find, you know, different tastes, like a little bit sour apples, sweeter apples, and the combination of those two with some nuts or nut butters is really good. So I see a couple more people joined. We're just sharing our names in the chat box so I know who's here. And then if you could also share it with us, your favorite snack. What do you like to eat between your meals or before bed? Do you have a favorite bedtime snack? All right. Nader said chips. Yeah, chips. I know the salty foods tend to be really comforting around bedtime. Alicia said grapes. Oh, Alicia, hi. Grapes. Yeah, I know, especially like the red grapes that are crunchy and sweet. Those are so good. Hi. Dr. Suriman also said almonds, figs, and walnuts. Yeah, I love those too. Figs are one of my favorite fruit, especially in the fall season. They're so good. All right, so just another minute and we'll go ahead and get started. If anyone is just joining, we're sharing our names in the chat so we know who's here. And then if you have a favorite snack that you like to eat, either bedtime or throughout the day, please share that in the chat as well. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And as everyone is probably already aware, this workshop is being recorded, so you'll get a complete recording afterwards. Ghazal said lentil chips. Yeah, lentil chips are really good too. Those are one of my favorites as well, especially with like a little bit of dip. All right, so we have these workshops once a month and they're completely free to you. And we try to share a new topic each month, something that can allow us to learn a little bit more about the connection between the gut and the brain. So how does food affect our mood, our emotions, and our mental health? So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ailar, and I'm the nutritionist at Pacific Integrative Psychiatry. And today I'm joined with Dr. Nishi Bhopal, who's an integrative psychiatrist and sleep specialist. So we'll get her input as well as far as how does sleep affect our diet, our eating habits, and vice versa. How does our nutrition and the way we eat affect our sleep? All right. So yes, today's topic is nutrition and sleep. All right. And then before we get started and we get into it, I just want to share a little bit about our practice and what we do here at Pacific Integrative Psychiatry and what makes our practice really unique. So we take a whole body holistic approach to mental health. So not just looking at what's going on with our emotions, our mental state, but we also try to look at other aspects of our health. In an integrative setting, we look at things like our diet, our nutrition, our exercise, sleep quality. So these are some of the services that we offer. We offer psychiatry, which involves medication management and integrative forms of treatment. We offer psychotherapy, which involves coaching and mindset work. And we actually have a new therapist that joined our practice. His name is Andrew. He's taking new clients. So if you're looking to work with a therapist instead of a psychiatrist, you can visit our website as well and learn more about the services that he offers. And then I provide one-on-one nutrition consultations. So we really do individualized approaches to the diet, the ways that you eat, how does food impact your mental health, how does it contribute to things like depression and anxiety. And we offer really unique testing. We use laboratory testing that allows us to dig deeper and use a functional medicine approach to find the root cause of chronic conditions and imbalances in the body. All right, so these workshops are once a month, typically on the third or fourth Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m., and they're over Zoom. And if you're not able to join live, I still recommend signing up because you'll get a complete recording of the workshop afterwards. You can play it back. You can listen to things that you might have missed. And participation is encouraged and welcome. So if you want to turn on your cameras or if you want to turn on your audio and raise your hand to ask a question, we definitely welcome that as well. Or if you feel more comfortable, please type in your questions in the chat box. We'll be monitoring that as we go along. And then you should have received an email prior to the workshop. If you have your handouts nearby, we recommend using that to follow along and take notes. You can write comments or questions that you have as we go along. And then lastly, please respect everyone's privacy on here. Some people might share personal information, and then try to minimize any distractions as well. Okay, and before we get started with today's topic, so last month's workshop was about meal prepping. So learning about how to put together a healthy meal, using a variety of macronutrients, different ingredients that can help our mood, our emotions, our mental health, and that can really allow us to not feel as stressed when it comes to mealtime. So we talked about, healthy sources of protein, vegetables, healthy fats. So for anyone that was there last time, did you try something new with your diet? Did you try a new monthly experiment? And how did that go? So I want to hear from you guys. Let me know either in the chat or you can raise your hand or share with us through your audio. What monthly experiment did you do last month? So some examples maybe, did you try meal prepping for lunch, dinner? Did you try adding more protein or healthy fats into a specific meal? And how did that go?
I can share.
Go ahead, Nishi.
Hi, everybody. So I tried for my monthly experiment to increase fats, healthy fats. And so I increased intake of nuts, which are one of my favorite snacks, as I said as well. So nuts, flaxseed, adding flaxseed to granola or to smoothies, and then also being more consistent with my omega-3 supplement, because sometimes I forget to take my supplements. So I'm trying to be more consistent with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I also tried to increase my intake of omega-3s and healthy fats, and just being more conscious and aware of doing it and being more intentional, I think is important. And same with the supplements, sometimes you forget, you're like, did I already take that or did I not take it? And should I just skip it or should I double up? So yeah, definitely keeping track of that, making sure you're taking all your supplements. Ghazal said, I tried to pay more attention to random snacking out of boredom and only ate when I was actually hungry. I also tried a little bit of meal prepping. Yeah, and that's so important. So we talked about mindful eating, paying attention to satiety and hunger cues, and really being in tune with your body so you can meet its needs. I know oftentimes we can snack or try to eat out of just boredom, or if we're under stress, we can eat certain types of foods that might be more comforting. So that's really great. And meal prepping as well. Sherry said breakfast with protein, not sugar. Yeah. And that's really important because, first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, if you have sugar, if you have something starchy, carbohydrates, it's going to spike your blood sugars. And we talked about how protein can give you more sustainable energy, can help with blood sugar balance, and it can even put us in a better mood and help maintain that mood for a longer time. All right. Anybody else that joined us last month, let us know in the chat. What experiment did you try? How did it go? And we'll be monitoring that as we go along. All right. So here's a little bit of information about where we're going today and what you can expect for the rest of the workshop. So we'll be talking about nutrition and food for better sleep. We'll also be talking about eating windows. I know a lot of people are curious about, is there a certain time of day that I should be eating and other times of day where I should be fasting, and how can this impact your sleep? And then we'll also talk about some healthy snacks, things you can have close to bedtime. I know a lot of times we can get hungry before bed. So what kind of snacks can actually still allow you to sleep well at night without disrupting your sleep? And then at the end, we'll try a monthly experiment, something you can take away and try to implement over this next month until our next workshop. And then we'll open it up for a Q&A, and we encourage participation. So any questions that you have, you can share them as we go along in the chat, or you can save them till the end. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can get right into it. All right, Nishi, so before we get started, I know a lot of people are thinking, well, I do care about my sleep and I try to sleep well at night, but why should I care about my sleep? Or why does my sleep quality matter so much on my overall health? And what is good sleep quality? So can you talk a little bit more about that and tell us, how can we know if we're getting a good quality of sleep, and what does that really look like, and how does it impact our health?
Yeah, that's a great question. So sleep really affects every aspect of health, right? So it affects your daytime energy levels, your ability to concentrate, just how you go through your day. But sleep also affects mental health. There's a bidirectional relationship between sleep and mental health. So, and many of us would know this from personal experience, right? So if you haven't gotten a great night's sleep, you might be a little bit more anxious or irritable the next day. You might notice that your mood isn't as good. But in the long run, we do see higher rates of depression and anxiety when people are not getting good quality sleep, because sleep is restorative for the brain and for the body. And then without good quality sleep, we also see higher rates of other medical issues. So higher rates of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, metabolic issues like diabetes, and so forth. So it really does affect every system of the body. So I think of sleep as really the foundation of health. It's not just a pillar of health. When we think about exercise and diet, all of these things support optimal health and well-being, but sleep is the foundation to all of that. Because if you're not getting good sleep, you don't have the energy to exercise. It's going to affect your appetite and your food choices, as we're going to discuss today. So that's why sleep, in a nutshell, is so important. Now, one of the aspects of sleep that we're going to talk about today is nutrition, and it's not usually the first thing that people think about when they're working on optimizing their sleep quality, right? And so, to your question of, okay, how do we know if we're getting good quality sleep? The simplest way is to notice how you're feeling. That's the best thing. Even if you're using a Apple Watch or Fitbit or some other device, I have an Oura Ring that I use. Even if you're using all these things, it'll give you like your readiness score and your sleep score and all of these metrics. But at the end of the day, how you feel is the most important thing. So when you're getting good quality sleep, you should feel refreshed when you wake up in the morning. You should have good levels of energy throughout the day. You may notice a little bit of a dip in the afternoon around 1 or 2 p.m. That's normal. We all get a little bit of a dip, and that's okay. But you shouldn't feel like you're dragging all day long. You should feel like your sleep is relatively continuous. It's normal to have an awakening or two at night, just for a few minutes to wake up to go to the bathroom, or you might, wake up just kind of spontaneously and go back to sleep within 15 minutes or so. That's actually quite normal. But if you're having extended periods of wakefulness during your sleep, that's a sign that there might be something going on that's disrupting your sleep quality. So these are some of the general factors. On my YouTube channel, I have a whole video on how to know if you're getting good sleep quality. So if people want more information on that, they can check that out. But really check in with yourself to see how you feel. And then as far as duration of sleep, most people need somewhere between 7 to 9 hours. It's going to change from night to night, right? So, in our practice, we see patients who are struggling with sleep, and many of them are trying to get this perfect 8 hours of sleep every night. And that's just not how sleep works. There are going to be nights where you get a little bit more. There's going to be times where you get a little bit less. But on balance, you want to be getting around 7 to 9. If you're finding that you're getting that amount and you still feel tired all the time, then it's a good idea to talk to somebody to see talk to a physician to see what might be going on.
Yeah, that's so good. And, I love what you said about how important sleep is on our overall health, and how, a lot of people don't really think about their sleep quality. They try to focus so much on nutrition and exercise, and then they're not sleeping well at night. And a lot of times our sleep affects our mood, like you said, throughout the day. The other night, I didn't sleep well at night. I didn't get enough sleep. And I use, like a smartwatch to track my sleep, but I know it can't be very accurate in telling me how perfectly I slept throughout the night, the different stages of sleep I went through, the wakefulness I had. So my mood that day was really showing it. And I felt tired, and I started to feel tired later on in the evening. And it also affects our eating habits, like you said. So we tend to want to eat differently, eat different foods, and it might even affect the hours of the day that we're eating. I had a patient the other day that was telling me, I think the reason I'm having more constipation might be because I'm not sleeping well at night, right? So it's one of those things that we really have to look at. In an integrative practice, we have the opportunity to do that. We can actually dig that deep into an individual's lifestyle and see, you only got 6 hours, you got 5 hours, whereas normally you get 8. Okay, that could be causing, the disruption in your digestive system. And I love that we work closely together in our practice so that I know that this, patient's sleep and their mental health is being followed by someone like you. So I can just say, oh, perfect. You're seeing Nishi tomorrow, so you'll talk to her about your sleep. But yeah, so, as far as the nutrition, I'll talk a little bit more about just how the different types of foods that we eat can affect our sleep, because like you said, it's, bidirectional, and it can really be, the food affecting the sleep, or the sleep affecting the nutrition and the foods that we eat. So, and I'll first start with, what I hear very commonly from people, and I'll hear it pretty much on a daily basis. And a lot of people say, well, how come I sleep so well when I eat in this way? And it's things like, okay, well, I drink coffee, I drink tea, or I really carbohydrate rich foods right before bedtime. So sleep is very individualized, right? So it has to be taken into account based on that individual's daily life, right? What is their schedule like, and what do they do throughout the day? But when it comes to nutrition for getting a good quality of sleep, first we want to eliminate factors and things that can actually disrupt our sleep quality. So not just eating foods that can promote better sleep, but also taking out things that might cause us to not have a good quality of sleep. And this can also be foods that cause you to not feel well throughout the day too, right? So inflammatory foods, processed foods, packaged foods that tend to be high in refined sugars and starches. So throughout the day, you might notice fluctuations in your mood and your blood sugars. And this also can linger on throughout the nighttime, and it can cause disturbances in your sleep. And like you mentioned, having some way to track that, like an Oura ring, or if you have a smartwatch, you can really see, okay, what stages of sleep did you enter and how long did you stay in those? Other times, people say, well, I have coffee or caffeinated beverages or alcohol right before bed. And they say, well, I fall asleep, really well, and it's not disrupting my sleep. And, a lot of times when we have coffee after that afternoon mark, so let's say you're going to bed at 10 p.m. and you have your last cup of coffee at 3 p.m. So the half-life of caffeine can actually extend all the way up to 10 hours. So 9 or 10 hours. So imagine you have that coffee at 3 p.m. and it's staying in your body till around midnight. You're trying to fall asleep at 10 p.m. Maybe you do fall asleep, but that caffeine is still in your body. And when your body runs out, it's going to respond to that. And it's going to either cause you to enter a different stage of sleep, as you can talk about this, or it can cause you to not get a good quality of sleep. And same with the alcohol. So the alcohol that you have, it initially can cause you to fall asleep faster, but then later on in the night, as the alcohol wears off, this is going to disrupt your sleep. So can you talk a little bit more about the impacts of caffeine and alcohol specifically? Because I know these are two beverages that a lot of people tend to consume. They tend to struggle with cutting off their caffeine, past a certain point, or they want to have alcoholic beverages close to bedtime because they think it helps them fall asleep more easily.
Definitely. So one of the ways that caffeine affects the sleep system is that it actually blocks the adenosine receptor. So adenosine is a neurotransmitter, and I'll just type the spelling of it in the chat in case anyone's interested. So adenosine is a neurotransmitter that essentially makes us feel sleepy. So the longer we're awake, the more adenosine builds up in our system. And so by the time it's bedtime, we should have high levels of adenosine that tell us that it's sleep. It makes your eyes heavy and your head start to nod. And that's part of what regulates our sleep drive, what's known as our sleep drive that makes us fall asleep. So what caffeine does is it blocks the receptor that adenosine binds to, right? So the adenosine is still building up, but the receptor in the brain that adenosine binds to is now bound to caffeine. Right. So the caffeine molecule looks like the adenosine molecule. So the caffeine is blocking that adenosine. So the adenosine can't send the signal. So it's going to block sleepiness. And so this is why at 2 p.m., in the afternoon, when we have that natural circadian dip, the lineup at Starbucks is around the corner, right? Because everyone wants their caffeine to help them feel awake and alert. So you will see that, it might delay sleep onset, or if people do fall asleep, they might have more disrupted sleep. And sometimes we see that on a sleep study that they have more sleep disruptions across the night. So I always recommend to people, like, if you feel like caffeine helps you sleep, okay, just, again, pay attention and notice how you feel, how it affects you. How do you feel when you don't use caffeine? How do you feel when you do? And there's no one size fits all, but do know that it has an impact on our sleep and our sleep quality. As for alcohol, so alcohol causes disruption of REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. And people will often say they fall asleep a little bit more easily with alcohol because it is a sedative, right? So it helps people with sleep onset, but later during the night, you're going to get disruptions of REM sleep, and then you're going to get disruption of sleep continuity. So it's going to cause more nighttime awakenings, especially as that alcohol wears off after a few hours. And so that's why people will say, well, I fell asleep, but then I woke up at 2 or 3 in the morning and they were tossing and turning the rest of the night. So again, pay attention to see how it affects your sleep. I know that if I consume alcohol, like I just know I'm not going to sleep well. Like that's the trade-off, right? Okay, if I'm going to have a glass of wine with dinner, like, okay, I'm not getting good sleep tonight, and I'll, just roll with it, right? So just pay attention to how these things make you feel. But I think another aspect of sleep that people often don't think about is the nutrition piece with regard to macronutrients and micronutrients. And so we can talk a little bit more about that as well. And that's kind of how I like to think about it. So looking at caffeine consumption, alcohol consumption, and then like what overall are you eating during the day? Hydration is important too, drinking water as well. And we can talk about that a little bit later too, because I think of water as another macronutrient. But Ailar, do you want to share a little bit more about macronutrients and micronutrients and the role with sleep? And then I can talk a bit more about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as first defining, macronutrients, what are they? So we have the protein, carbohydrates, and healthy fats. So these are all different categories of nutrients that we want to be getting throughout the day and in all of our meals, ideally. And there are specific types of nutrients that can actually help with sleep onset and actually helping you sleep better at night. But it also has to do with the quality of these nutrients. So the quality of the protein that you're eating. And just to give some examples for people that might not be familiar, protein can come from animals or plants. So things like fish, chicken, eggs, plant-based sources like beans, lentils, nuts and seeds, tofu, tempeh. So the protein is one thing that helps with our blood sugar regulation. And then the carbohydrates are starchy foods, sugary foods, foods that have flour in them, like bread, rice, pastas, tortillas, vegetables like corn, potatoes. And then the fats, so fats can come from animals. The healthy fats would be things like fish, salmon, sardines, tuna, or plant-based sources of fats like avocados, olive oil, nuts and seeds. So you want to be getting a combination of these. And there have been some studies that have actually looked at specific macronutrient intake and how this affects sleep onset. And how it can affect our sleep quality. So a lot of times what people are looking for is that onset. They want to shorten the time that it takes for them to fall asleep at night. And that's what they're most concerned with. So when we look at carbohydrate intake, the studies specifically look at the glycemic index of the carbohydrates. So the glycemic index refers to how quickly does a carbohydrate elevate your blood sugar levels. So ideally, we don't want to be having carbohydrates that are really high glycemic index, because this is going to cause a really significant spike in your blood sugar levels. For example, if you have some ice cream before bedtime, or if you have some really sweet chocolatey dessert or a piece of cake or cookies. So these foods aren't going to help you sleep better at night, because they're actually going to give you more energy. If you notice, we feel more energized initially when we eat a lot of sweets and sugars. The sugars get distributed really quickly. They go right to our brain. They get circulated in our bloodstream. Versus if you have more lower glycemic index carbohydrates. So these are the ones that are more complex. So they're going to be a better quality carbohydrate. And they contain more fiber. They contain more whole grains. So things like quinoa, whole grain, whole wheat sources of breads, pastas. Sweet potatoes also have more fiber compared to white potatoes. So if you have more high quality carbohydrates, more complex carbohydrates, they can actually help you sleep better at night. Now, some people have to be careful about this, especially if they have issues with their blood sugar management. So people who might have diabetes, type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, hyperglycemia, they don't want to be eating these carbohydrates alone or in large portion sizes. And this is why the combination of our macronutrients is really important. So pairing your carbohydrate with a good quality protein, maybe some healthy fats. So the combination of these together can actually help your sleep quality. And they've done the research and seen that the carbohydrates can actually help with the sleep onset. So I recommend including carbohydrates in your dinner. We don't have to be scared of carbs late at night and thinking, okay, this is going to be unhealthy for me because carbs aren't good. They can actually help with your sleep. But again, choosing higher quality carbohydrates, ideally more complex carbohydrates with fiber, pairing your carbohydrates with a protein, and then also the quality of your fat matters too. So choosing a type of fat that has higher amounts of omega-3s, lower ratios of omega-6, trying to avoid trans fats, right? A lot of fried, greasy foods, especially if you tend to eat out. Restaurants don't like to use avocado oil or olive oil. In most cases, they use inflammatory oils, nut oils, seed oils, which tend to be more unhealthy. They're not a good quality fat. And they can actually disrupt your sleep by causing higher rates of inflammation. And when your body responds to inflammation, it has to prioritize that, right? It's not going to let you really fall asleep and have a good quality of sleep when it's under the inflammatory response. And then as far as micronutrients, so micronutrients, are things like specific vitamins, minerals that we need to get in our diet. And this can also be very specific for individuals. So we really have to take an individualized approach to see what nutrients are you lacking? Are you insufficient in them? Are you deficient in them? We can't just say, everyone take this dose of magnesium and it's going to help you sleep better, right? So we have to see, okay, what are your magnesium levels like? How much of a difficult time do you have falling asleep? Do you also have digestive issues like constipation, which may also be linked to magnesium? Some people have like muscle cramping, headaches, right? So specific micronutrients, things like the B vitamins, magnesium, zinc, even vitamin D, which we get from the sun. And then we still need that vitamin D for our sleep. And vitamin D can actually act as a precursor to a lot of hormones that can help regulate our sleep. So not just taking a supplement randomly just because you think it might help you sleep better, but really analyzing your body's needs and working with a healthcare professional that can help you assess that a bit further. And I always recommend using a food first approach. So trying the food, seeing how it helps you sleep. Is it helping you get your nutritional needs? And then supplementing as needed.
Definitely. That's all really helpful information. And just to kind of tack on to that, a few things. So one, the research on nutrition and sleep is an evolving area of study, right? So a lot of these studies are still preliminary. So we're still learning more about how nutrition actually affects sleep, and the nuances that, how these different nutrients interact with the sleep system. So one thing just for people to remember is that food provides the building blocks for our body to produce the hormones and neurotransmitters like Ailar was talking about. So serotonin and melatonin and acetylcholine and all these other neurotransmitters that are involved in our sleep regulation, our body makes them from food, right? So if we're not getting adequate nutrition or the right levels and types of nutrients, our body's not able to produce those neurotransmitters. And so that's going to have an effect on sleep. And you also spoke about inflammation. So inflammation is also implicated in insomnia. And we know that inflammation is also associated with gut dysbiosis or problems with the gut microbiome, which is often largely related to food, right? So when there's higher levels of inflammation, we're going to see higher levels of sleep issues, and then sleep issues cause more inflammation. So it's this vicious cycle. So starting with food, which is something that we can control, is a great first step. There are some interesting studies that I'll share here. So one was looking at a group of women, and they found that consuming higher levels of refined carbohydrates, so things like noodles, sweets, pastries, sugary drinks, and then skipping breakfast and having irregular meals. This was a study of like 3,000 women in Japan. So all of these things contributed to insomnia. And then the women who were eating more fish, seafood, so those healthy fats, omega-3s, fresh vegetables, fruits and vegetables, they had better sleep quality overall. There's also studies showing that fried foods, so you talked about those unhealthy fats or the fried foods, consuming fried foods leads to more wake-ups at night, and it shortens the duration of slow wave sleep, which is the deep restorative sleep, where a lot of recovery happens. And so those fried foods actually can reduce the amount of that deep restorative sleep that we're getting. On the flip side, people who ate more fruits, vegetables, and dietary fiber, and then these healthy fats, had better sleep onset and more slow wave sleep, especially associated with the fiber. So again, a lot of these are preliminary studies. So, it'll be really interesting to see how things evolve. But as you were saying before, like, just really start to notice when you eat different kinds of foods, how is it affecting your sleep and your sleep quality? The other thing we were talking about is how sleep affects your metabolism, right? So when you're not getting enough sleep, it affects the hormones leptin and ghrelin, which are associated in satiety or hunger and feeling full. So leptin is a hormone that makes us feel full or satiated. And then ghrelin is a hormone that makes us feel hungry. I always remember that because it makes your stomach growl when you're hungry. So ghrelin makes your stomach growl, right? So it makes you hungry. So when we're sleep deprived, we get higher levels of ghrelin, so we feel hungrier, and lower levels of leptin. So we're not as satiated when we eat. So what does that result in? Then we're reaching for a bag of chips or a pastry or cookies or something like that to give us energy to get through the day because we're sleep deprived. So that relationship between nutrition and sleep is bidirectional, as you were speaking about before. And then one last thing on the macronutrients with protein. So there is some evidence showing that protein in the evening can help with muscle synthesis during sleep. So if you're working out, if you're doing lifting weights or you're trying to build up your muscle, you can consider adding in some protein into your dinner or your evening snack.
Yeah, that's so good. And, the sleep that we get is really that time that our body has the only opportunity to do a lot of these things. It's like we're resting and it gets to prioritize all these things that it needs to do, like building muscles from the protein that we eat. And one thing to mention about that is, I know some clients that I have that like to work out in the evenings, right? And they tend to use either a protein powder supplement, a pre-workout, post-workout. So one thing to look out for is if your pre or post-workout has caffeine in it, which I know a lot of them can do that. So that can disrupt your sleep. So if you are looking to get protein from a supplement rather than from a meal, just be on the lookout for the caffeine, because if you are having the caffeine, it's going to help you perform better for your workout, but then later on, it's not going to allow you to fall asleep as quickly. So it's going to shift your whole, your schedule, and then you might even wake up feeling more tired or groggy the next day, and then end up having to have more caffeine to feel more awake. But I want to talk a little bit more about, the hours that we're sleeping, right? So people might be thinking, okay, well, is there a certain time of day that I should be trying to go to bed by? Is there a certain hour I should be trying to wake up by? And then how does that allow me to eat, and what hours should I be eating? So are there certain hours, from a sleep perspective that you would recommend that people should be sleeping? I know you said the certain duration of sleep that we should be getting, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the nutritional aspect and the eating windows.
Definitely. So it's a great question. And the short answer is it depends. Everybody's different, right? So you don't have to fit yourself into this. I go to bed at 10 and I wake up at 6 a.m. every day. That simply doesn't work for everyone. Everyone has a slightly different circadian rhythm or body clock. Some people are a little bit more on the later or delayed side. Some people are more on the advanced or earlier side. So, again, it's going to depend on your individual physiology, your work schedule, your other demands. So what's important here, though, is regularity. So whatever your schedule is, you should try to be as consistent with that as possible. And the easiest way to do that is to focus on your wake up time, because if you are waking up, let's say at 6 a.m. on a weekday, and then let's say you sleep until 9 a.m. on a weekend, that's a 3-hour difference. So it creates a jet lag type effect called social jet lag, right? So it's like you're traveling every weekend from the East Coast to the West Coast without actually traveling. So maintaining that consistent wake up time within about an hour of each day, you don't have to be perfect all the time, but trying to be as consistent as you can is going to help with your sleep regularity. And then you'll find that your sleep onset time starts to fall into place. It's easier to make yourself wake up than it is to force yourself to fall asleep. So this ties into the circadian rhythm, right? So we talked about the sleep drive earlier with regard to adenosine, that neurotransmitter that builds up to make us feel sleepy. The next system that affects our sleep is the circadian rhythm, in addition to the sleep drive. So circadian rhythm is our body clock, and it's largely tied to the light and dark cycle. So the rising and setting of the sun, essentially. So some people, like I was saying, have a bit of a delayed body clock. Some people have a little bit of an earlier body clock, but we all have one, right? We all have a body clock. So the body clock doesn't only regulate our sleep wake timing, it regulates pretty much every function in the body, including hunger and digestion and metabolism. And so when we know that when people are eating out of alignment with the circadian rhythm, or they're eating at kind of irregular times, it has an impact on their digestion, and it also has an impact on their insulin and their glucose and overall metabolic health. Okay, so what's the best time to eat to help improve your sleep quality? Short answer is we don't really know for sure. Again, this is one of those areas of research that is emerging. Can you shift your body clock by changing the timing of your meals? There was a study looking at this, and it was kind of inconclusive. But in Ayurveda, which is the ancient system of healing from India, which is thousands of years old, they have a very sophisticated understanding of the body clock, and they do recommend certain times of day to eat certain types of foods, and certain sizes of meals. Some modern circadian researchers are now looking into this, and their findings are actually really similar to what's recommended in Ayurveda. So essentially, what is recommended is to eat consistently around the same times each day, so that irregularity of meal times can negatively impact your metabolic health and potentially impact your sleep cycle. That's yet to be determined in research, but there may be a link there. So eating consistently within a 12-hour window is typically what's recommended. They also recommend eating most of your calories earlier in the day. So your larger meals earlier in the day and then lighter meal in the evening. And we recommend this to our patients, right? Like not to eat a heavy meal within a few hours of going to bed, because your body's either going to digest food or it's going to go to sleep. It's not going to do both, right? So you want to give yourself time to digest. So eating more of your calories earlier in the day, and this is what's recommended in Ayurveda, to eat your larger meal at lunchtime, So I often do recommend this to my patients, depending on their situation. And then avoiding food intake very close to bedtime or very early in the morning when your melatonin levels are still high. So those are the 3 recommendations. So consistent eating time, more calories earlier in the day, and then not eating too late or too early in the morning.
Yeah. And I love what you said, about the consistency, because our bodies like to be running on a clock, right? And when we change things, like you said, when you're adjusting like from a different time zone, it takes several days for your body to adjust to that. So imagine trying to do that within a day. Your body's going to be confused. It's going to be hungry at different hours. And even, looking back at our ancestors, they didn't have light. So they had to just go with the sunlight, and they had to eat during the hours when the sun was out, and then go to bed when the sun was gone. And then when they learned how to make fire, and now we have light that we can use artificial light and just stay up as late as we want. It really can affect our hormonal imbalances too, like you said. So melatonin versus, cortisol rises in the morning. The body can get really confused, and it can try to compensate for it by eating, right? To keep us awake during the hours that we actually need to be sleeping. And like you said, it really depends. And it's really hard to say that you should be eating from this hour to this hour. You should be sleeping from this hour to this hour. And a lot of people struggle with this depending on their schedule. So I have some clients, who work later on in the evenings, and they can't eat dinner at 6 p.m. because they're working maybe till 8 p.m. Right. So seeing what works with your schedule and then finding consistency in that. When I see clients who tell me I don't have a consistent eating schedule, this is a really big warning for mood swings and blood sugar fluctuations throughout the day. So they notice, I'm in a bad mood, and then someone tells me to eat because I can't even realize that I'm hungry, and then it puts me in a good mood, right? So we have to really be aware of that, and then get on that consistent eating schedule, and you'll notice even changes in your mood. Your body's alarm clock is going to shift, and you'll probably wake up feeling hungry about an hour, after you've been awake. Your body's going to know, okay, I had dinner at 7, I went to bed at 10 p.m., and now it's 8 a.m. and I'm hungry, right? So the shifts and the changes in our hormone levels are actually going to signal us, as long as we pay attention to those. And I like what you said, trying to eat breakfast, maybe an hour after waking up, trying to eat dinner about 3 hours before going to bed. This is really going to allow our body to rest and digest, but then still allow us to sleep well at night instead of trying to digest all that food while we're lying down. And a lot of people are prone to things like heartburn and acid reflux. And as we know, when we're lying down, the stomach acid is going to have a tendency to come back up, or it's going to cause heartburn when we're trying to digest the food. And we're also trying to rest at the same time. So having a good quality meal with things like protein, healthy fats, good quality protein, high quality carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates that we talked about, but maybe about 3 hours before bed. And then if you do get hungry before bed, we'll talk a little bit about, healthy snacks too, because I know a lot of people have a tendency to want to eat a snack before bedtime. So as far as the snacks, I'll talk a little bit about this, Nishi, and then you can say a little bit more about how it affects our sleep. But as far as the snacks, so there are certain types of, amino acids, hormones, and neurotransmitters that can help our sleep onset and our sleep quality, things like melatonin, tryptophan, serotonin. So these all regulate our sleep. And we can actually find them in certain types of foods that can allow us to still get nutrients without disrupting our sleep quality. So we talked about, carbohydrates helping with feelings of tiredness, sleep onset. But there are certain types of snacks that things like nuts and seeds. I know a lot of people said that they love that as a snack. So the nuts and seeds can actually help with sleep onset, and they can help with falling asleep more easily at night because of the tryptophan that they contain. Also, they contain some melatonin, and all these hormones and neurotransmitters are actually all connected, and they can actually help each other function, which is really cool. Also, things like kiwis, cherries, a glass of warm milk like babies like to have, and it helps, the tryptophan release, and it helps them sleep more easily at nighttime. If people have dairy sensitivities or they're lactose intolerant, you can try an alternative like oat milk. And this can be really soothing around nighttime, and it can still help you sleep better. Also, herbal teas, like chamomile tea, right? That's something that I really like to have. About an hour before bed, I would say, because I know some people struggle with having to wake up in the middle of the night and go use the restroom, but it can be a really calming herb that can still help you sleep better at night. So can you talk a little bit more about, tryptophan, melatonin, serotonin? So how do these affect our sleep? And if we get them from eating these certain types of snacks, is it going to help our sleep onset and our sleep quality?
Yeah, for sure. So tryptophan is an amino acid that we largely get from food, and then it's serotonin and melatonin are made from tryptophan, right? And so serotonin and melatonin are involved in sleep regulation, and many people have heard of melatonin, which is a hormone produced by the pineal gland, but it's also produced in the gut as well. The melatonin produced in the pineal gland helps to regulate our sleep-wake cycles and our body temperature. The melatonin that's produced in the gut is thought to be more involved in anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects rather than sleep. But certainly getting those building blocks of tryptophan and also GABA, which is another neurotransmitter that is involved in sleep, and it helps reduce anxiety. We also can get GABA from foods as well. So as you mentioned, things like nuts, seeds, a lot of plant-based sources, right? So nuts, seeds, vegetables, milk, as you mentioned, and I know Dr. Narayan put some good comments here in the chat, which is relevant. He mentioned foods like poppy seeds, nutmeg powder, and milk. So that's a great combination. And you could do something like a golden milk, which is warm milk. You could do oat milk, like you said, or regular milk, and add some nutmeg to it. You could add some turmeric to it, a little bit of black pepper, saffron, things like that. And it's not only full of nutrients, like it's going to give you some tryptophan and things, but it's calming. It's just a nice ritual to have in the evening as well. It can help balance your blood sugar levels. So this is why eating a nighttime snack can be helpful for people, because often we'll see people who complain of waking up in the middle of the night. They fall asleep okay, and then they're like, I'm up at like 1 or 2 in the morning and I don't really know why. And sometimes it can be related to a drop in their blood sugar, especially if they've eaten dinner several hours before. So having a bedtime snack or something like a golden milk can help stabilize things. And so that's an experiment for people to consider to see if that helps reduce some of these nighttime awakenings. Dr. Narayan also mentioned keeping a quarter of the stomach empty helps in proper digestion. So that's correct, because, I think many of us are conditioned to eat to the point where we're full, and that's just not good for digestion. It's not good for metabolism and even just mindset and things like this, right? Like just a relationship with food. So eating to the point where you're satisfied, but not that you're so full that you're uncomfortable, is also something to pay attention to. But I'll take a pause there. I'd love to hear any questions from people, or because I know we're coming up to 45 minutes. Do people have questions, comments? What works for you guys when it comes to nutrition and sleep? Let us know.
Yeah, and we got a recipe for golden milk from Cassie in the chat if anyone's curious about how to make golden milk.
Cassie, how about you? Kirtana, any thoughts?
Actually, hi everyone. I'm also part of the admin team here, but I come to these because I learned so much. And my question actually is has to do with taking melatonin gummies. I know it's like super popular. I was wondering if it's safe to take every day before you go to bed. How soon before do you recommend?
Sure. So I'm not a fan of melatonin gummies, or taking melatonin in general, except in certain circumstances. So melatonin in itself is not shown to help with insomnia or sleep. I mean, there's certain instances where it can be helpful, like jet lag, shift work disorder, shift work and certain types of shift work situations, and circadian rhythm phase disorders. So like that advanced sleep phase or delayed sleep phase that I was talking about. So melatonin is really a body clock regulator. So it's used strategically at certain timings to shift the body clock and to support sleep. Sometimes I do recommend melatonin in certain cases to help people kind of get their sleep back on track. Dosing is very important. So you might find in these gummies that they often have a lot of melatonin in them. So they might have like 3, 5, 10 milligrams. Usually when we use it physiologically, like that's multiple times more than your brain would produce. So physiological dose is about 0.3 milligrams or 300 micrograms. So that's usually around the dosing that I would use with patients. The quality is really important, though. That's another reason I'm not a huge fan of gummies, because you don't actually know what's in them. And there was a study that came out recently showing that the amount of melatonin in these things vary widely, sometimes like 74% to 300% more than what it says on the label. Some of them even contain things like serotonin and CBD, stuff that wasn't supposed to be in there. So using a professional grade supplement is really important. In our practice, we use Fullscript for professional grade supplements, and that's what I take as well. Like I only use professional grade ones because you just don't know. These things aren't regulated by the FDA, and you want them to be third-party tested. So one last point about, we could do a whole workshop on melatonin, so maybe we'll plan to do that. But one other thing about melatonin is that it can be helpful for people over the age of 55, because as we age, the pineal gland produces less melatonin. So for people over 55, using an extended release melatonin, and I think the studies looked at 1 or 2 milligrams, can be helpful. But again, it's not something I recommend just taking over the counter without guidance, because there is a proper way to use it.
We have a question in the chat. Can we use valerian root extracts for good sleep?
Yes, there is evidence showing that valerian root can be helpful for sleep as well. Valerian acts very similar. It works on the GABA receptor, so it acts very similar to benzodiazepines. So it's kind of like a natural version of like an Ativan or Xanax, that type of medication. So you have to be careful, because it can also have similar side effects and withdrawal effects, like those medications can. So again, it's not something that I would necessarily be using long-term. But it can be sometimes useful as a support in conjunction with a sleep plan. So, when people are using supplements or they're relying on these things to sleep, then it makes me wonder, well, what's actually going on with their sleep? Is there a sleep disorder? Is there anxiety that's not being addressed? Is there sleep apnea? Is there something else going on? So for people who are finding they can't sleep without these external sleep aids, whether they're supplements or other things, then it might be worth talking to a professional to see, okay, let's just take a look at what's going on here. Gazal's asking thoughts on screen time prior to sleep. That's a really interesting question, right? Because we've all heard that you should shut off all your screens and no blue light and all this stuff at nighttime. So screens can be useful in some cases, actually. Of course, you don't want to be looking at bright lights in the evening. That's going to affect your brain's production of melatonin, because melatonin is produced in an environment of darkness. So you don't want to have like your blue light screens at their brightest. Turn the brightness down, or you can use a blue light blocker like f.lux is an app, or use the night shift mode. You don't want to be using your screens in the hour or two before bed to be looking at social media, doing your emails, catching up on work, watching a horror movie, true crime documentaries, all these things, right? It's not helpful for your nervous system. But if you're using a screen to maybe do a guided meditation, or maybe you're reading a Kindle, you're reading a relaxing book, not a Stephen King novel that's going to keep you up all night or something like this, screens can actually be helpful in certain cases, right? So I don't have a blanket policy that you should totally be off your screens, because if you find that your mind is active at night and doing a relaxing activity on your screen helps you, then by all means do it, right? But just be mindful of the impact it's having on your nervous system.
Yeah, I love that. And I actually remember what you said before. You said, it's better to do something relaxing, even if it's on a screen, than to lay there, anxiously trying to fall asleep and thinking, okay, this is my bedtime. Why am I not falling asleep?
Exactly. And sometimes soothing music, Dr. Ryan saying soothing music helps induce sound sleep. Like sometimes we all have nights where we can't sleep, right? So you don't have to, it's the anxiety about that creates ongoing sleep issues sometimes. But yeah, I mean, if I can't sleep, sometimes I'll just like put on like a YouTube video or something that's relaxing, and I turn the screen face down so the light's not bothering me, but I just listen to it, and that helps me. So if screens help you, then yes, they can be useful.
Yeah. So since we are a bit short on time, I'm going to move to the next step of our workshop. So we're going to try a monthly experiment now. So something you can take home, something you can try that you learned from today. Maybe you took notes, or maybe it has to do with the hours of your meals. Maybe you want to try eating a healthy snack before bed, or maybe you just want to try and adjust your eating window. So one thing that you can take away, and if there is something that comes to mind right now, I invite you to share it in the chat, or if you want to turn on your audio, you can share it with us out loud. And then we encourage you to just pay attention to see how it makes you feel. So you don't have to do anything fancy. You don't have to, use like a smartwatch or like an app to track your sleep. Just see, how does it make you feel? Does it help you sleep faster at night? Do you wake up feeling more rested? Do you have more energy throughout the day? And just checking in with your body. And then we invite you to come back next month and tell us, how did it go? Did you learn something new? And the goal is to, again, just be curious and paying attention to the connection between the gut and the brain. So we always talk about the food-mood connection, and it has to do with the gut-brain axis because they're always communicating. They're trying to talk to each other back and forth. So, I learned a lot of new things today about sleep, and I'll definitely be trying something. Annabelle said, I'll try eating smaller amounts. Yeah. So, the portion sizes is another thing. And like Nishi mentioned, trying to eat your larger meals or the majority of your calories earlier on in the day when we tend to be more active. So maybe making lunch your largest meal of the day and making dinner your smallest meal of the day, and knowing that it's okay to still have a snack afterwards. We'll implement mindful eating. Yeah. And, we talked about mindful eating in a previous workshop, but, paying attention to the hunger cues, the fullness cues. We talked about how ghrelin and leptin can be altered depending on our sleep quality. So when you really pay attention to your body, you can give it the nutrients that it needs. And even if it has to do with the portion sizes and the foods that you're craving. Alicia said, I'll try keeping a regular meal schedule or eat around the same time every day. Yeah. And that's, one of the most important things is the eating schedule, because it's going to shift your sleeping schedule. So if you normally go to bed at 10 p.m., but then you're eating dinner at 9 p.m., you might not end up going to bed until midnight. She also said, and I'll stop taking melatonin multiple times a week before bed. Yeah, that's a really important topic, Nishi. And I know a lot of people out there think like, okay, taking a melatonin supplement is going to help cure my sleep issues, or, it's something that works. And there's just so much misconception out there. Cassie said, I'm going to try cutting out all caffeine before 3 p.m. and cut down that second cup of coffee. Yeah. And I love how you said it, Cassie, because the goal isn't to, cold turkey, just cut out, all the caffeine, but setting a really specific goal, something that works with your lifestyle. I'll have clients that tell me, well, I need that energy till 6, 7 p.m. because I have, things that I'm doing. I'm still working. I need to keep the caffeine in my body to help me keep going. But I like what you said, cutting 3 p.m. is your cutoff time, and then you're just going to have the 2 cups of coffee, and seeing how it helps you sleep better. Is it helping improve your sleep quality? Plus, when you have less caffeine, it's going to help you stay more hydrated. All right, so a little bit of a recap about where we went. So we talked about nutrition for better sleep. So how the food you eat, even the timing that you eat, can help your sleep quality. We even talked about certain supplements and herbs. We talked about eating for your circadian rhythm and your internal alarm clock and how that can be shifted. And then we talked about some healthy bedtime snacks, snacks that can affect your tryptophan, melatonin, and serotonin levels. And then we talked about a monthly experiment, something you can take away and try at home. Let's see. Oh, yeah, of course. You're welcome. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We have these workshops once a month. They're absolutely free, and we try to do a new topic each month. If you have suggestions for future topics, please let us know. We have the link here in the chat where you can sign up. And we scheduled free discovery calls, through our practice, PacificIntegrativePsych.com. You can learn more about what we do, see if we're a good fit. And one last thing I'll mention before we go is I mentioned it earlier, we have a therapist working at our clinic, Andrew. So a lot of these changes, that we go through, it's about changing our behavior, right? So it's about setting a new habit, right? And it can be really tough to do, especially when you have a busy schedule, lifestyle, right? So talking to a therapist, someone that can really dig deeper into how do you feel about this change? How is it affecting you, right? Someone that can really help you walk through it can be really helpful. So if you're interested in working with Andrew, you can learn more about what he does, his background. There's a new YouTube video up on our YouTube channel where Dr. Bhopal Nishi does an interview with him, so you can get to know him a little bit better, or you can do a free discovery call and learn more about him. I'm also taking new clients for nutrition visits. We do functional nutrition, so we incorporate principles of functional medicine where we look for root cause of imbalances in the gut-brain axis. So if you're interested, you can schedule a free discovery call with me as well. And we put a link to our YouTube channel as well in the chat, so you can learn more about our practice there. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We hope to see you all next month.